KTRH News Time is 7:17. Joining us this morning is attorney Sarah Weddington from Dallas. Sarah, welcome to Houston's Morning News. It is nice to have you with us this morning.
Thank you so much.
Now, let me tell everybody who you are. You are the attorney that represented Norma McCorvey. She is Roe in Roe v. Wade back in the early 70s. I'm not sure, Sarah, if you knew exactly what this case would lead to, but certainly looking back now, you have seen that this is still one of the most contentious socio-political issues of our time and may continue to be. Did you have any idea when you took this case?
No, I certainly thought it was a time when contraception was hard for women to get. In Texas, abortion was illegal except to save the woman's life. So rape you couldn't get an abortion even if you'd been raped or incest or the woman's health was in jeopardy. It was only if her life was threatened. And if you had told me then, 40 years later, I would still be talking about it, I would never have believed it.
Now, Dr. Weddington, I am the most pro-life person that you're ever going to come across. So the Roe v. Wade decision makes me very, very sad. I also know that Norma McCorvey has since become a pro-life advocate. How does that make you feel? Has she contacted you at all? Have you talked to her since she has come to the light?
No, and as you probably know, for more than 25 years after Roe, she was very pro-choice. She wrote the book called I Am Roe.
Right.
It was only 25 years later that she became anti and wrote a book called No More Roe. So, each person has their own right to make their own decision. What your position is, her position is. But all of the polls show the majority of people think it ought to be the woman's choice, not a stranger, not a person in the legislature, that it ought to be the woman's choice because she is the one who's making that decision, who will be responsible for years. I mean, it's not somebody else's decision.
Dr. Weddington, I would just very nicely suggest that there are many different surveys, and many of those surveys would dispute what you said, but we can talk about that another time. What I want to talk to you about, if you'd hang on for just a second, is how this case was brought to trial and some of the issues that were being discussed and whether or not this case was based upon a fraud in your opinion. And I'll let Dr. Weddington answer that question in just a moment. KTRH News Time is 7:23. Joining me right now, Dr. Sarah Weddington. She's a Dallas attorney who successfully argued on the behalf of Norma McCorvey, in Roe v. Wade. In front of the Supreme Court in the early 70s, we now have legalized abortion in all 50 states. And Dr. Weddington, I want to thank you certainly for taking the time joining us. I told you I am very, very pro-life. I know I will get a gazillion emails from my audience saying, why didn't I just be mean to you and rip you apart? That is just not the way I do business. But I do want to ask you, knowing what you know now about this case, Norma McCorvey had told you she had been raped by, I believe, 2 gentlemen and a woman, or 3 gentlemen and a woman, and that was one of the reasons why this came to trial to begin with. We now know she's recanted that story. She'd been gotten pregnant by her boyfriend, and she is now pro-life. Do you look back on this case and wish you could retry it, or maybe not try it at all?
Well, I would wish I had picked a different plaintiff, but you see, when she said to me, would it help if I'd been raped? I said no, because that was not an exception under Texas law. So in fact, the case was tried for all women who were or might become pregnant and want the option of abortion.
But there was, we did believe in the early 70s that there was rape involved in this case until she recanted it. There are people that suggest that this case was based upon a fraud.
Well, that's just not true, Matt, because although after the case was decided, she did an interview with a Good Housekeeping reporter or writer, and in that story, she said that she had been raped. That was after the trial. Never in any of the pleadings or the things I wrote or the things I said to the Supreme Court was there ever any discussion of how she got pregnant, because nobody really knew, and I didn't have any evidence. She had not reported a rape to the police. She has told different stories so many times, I have no idea what reality is. And so I didn't ever put that in anything about the trial, about the case, about any reporters, anytime I ever talked to a reporter. So it is true. After the decision was made, 6 months later, in August of 1973, there was a printed story where the reporter put down what she told him, that she had been raped. And several years later, Carl Rowan, a Washington columnist, did an interview with her, and he said to her, "What about the rape?" And she said, "I lied."
Dr. Sarah Weddington joining us this morning, the attorney for Roe in Roe v. Wade. I thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you enjoy your time in Houston. Let's talk again, Dr. Weddington. Appreciate your time this morning.